Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Mad, Bad and Downright Strange Showcase, where I invite bloggers, filmmakers and fellow film junkies to help me work through the 1001 film Introduction to Cult and Obscure Cinema, which is the Mad, Bad and Downright Strange list. As always, I'm your host, Elwood Jones of From the Depths of DVD Hell, and joining me in the studio this evening is the head writer and editor-in-chief of French Toast Sunday, as well as a regular Lamcast contributor and coffee connoisseur. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the studio this evening, Lindsay Street.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Right, well, first off, for those who aren't aware of French Toast Sunday, do you want to just tell us a bit about what the site's about?
Sure. I'm really bad at plugging our site, but
Okay.
you should go to it. I think that says it all. Just kidding. We have a lot of different writers, and we kind of focus on. We have reviews for newer releases, but we also focus on a lot of lists and like fun features. We have like movie drinking games and things like that. So it's sort of a light approach to film criticism. We don't take anything too seriously over on the site, and we also have a podcast. It's called French Toast Sunday Podcast, so you can't forget it. And the site, the URL is just FrenchToastSunday.com.
Cool. And obviously, the first thing which came to mind is where did the name for French Toast Sunday actually come from?
It is the worst story, but unfortunately, I have to tell it a lot because French toast has nothing to do with films. Okay, so my boyfriend is known for sort of. He's always like one step behind on the humor side of things. Oh. And when we were trying to think of a name for the site 4 years ago, he said, you have to make it something arbitrary, like Rotten Tomatoes. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, like Rotten Tomatoes, that doesn't mean anything. And I was like, well, it does mean something. It means like they throw Rotten Tomatoes if something's bad. So the fact that, one, he didn't know that, and two, he just strung together the random assortment of words that was French Toast Sunday, and everyone likes to encourage his sort of ridiculous ideas. So that the name stuck, and it was around for a long time, and no one thought of anything better, so we kept it.
So you just sort of roll with it now.
Yes.
I mean, was there a particular sort of thing, a particular moment that sort of inspired you to create the site to begin with, or is it just through just sheer love of film criticism that you wanted to get into the field?
I always sort of liked dabbling in blogging and internet type things. And I really got into, I actually haven't been to the site in a while because I know it sort of shut down. It got taken over, but spill.com was,
okay, I've not heard of
are you familiar with them? Well, I was really into their podcast, and they had like animated movie reviews, and I just kind of dug what they did and the type of criticism they had.
Yeah.
And I thought like we could make a podcast. Like we could just sit around and kind of bullshit. So I asked a bunch of people, and for a while, like in the beginning, I think we recorded things that we didn't put up. It was mainly just like us chatting about whatever we wanted to chat about. And it slowly morphed into like, let's talk about movies every week. And then so it started with the podcast, really. And then we decided, let's build a site around it so we can put it out. And we'll write features. So the one thing like about our site, it's like it started with 6 of us, and we're all from Baltimore, Maryland. That's where my horrible accent derives from.
John Waters' country.
What?
It's John Waters' country as well.
Yes, it is, yeah. So we've got that going. And, so we all sort of podcast in the same room. And now we have writers from different areas, but that's where it was born, and we basically have been getting together almost every week for 4 years to record. So there's a lot of we don't take it too seriously.
Let's say it's quite the team that you got over there. I have to restrain myself from referring it to being the Scooby Gang. I don't know if you like go and solve like crimes and mysteries when you're not blogging, but.
No, but that is we've thought that's like one of the only Halloween costumes that we could all pull off as a group is Scooby-Doo, because it's hard to find a 6-person group costume, but we've yet to do it. There's a lot of fighting over, there's only 2 females in our group, and we both wear glasses, so there's a lot of fighting over who is going to be Thelma and who's going to be Daphne, because somebody wants to see all night, you know what I mean?
That's the thing. Thelma's really become like the cult figure. I said the last year.
Yeah.
'Cause before it used to be like no one wanted to be Filmer, now everyone wants to be Filmer.
Yeah, they like it. Yeah, there's something to her.
So, also, one of the main sort of things with your column, you like to talk a lot about coffee.
Yes.
Obviously, before we came on the this evening, I was obviously saying about David Lynch has got his own coffee. He's a big coffee fan for.
Yeah, he's. So did he? So what did he brew? Like he just has some beans somewhere?
I don't know. He's just like got beans like stacked up somewhere, but he's got like a plantation or what. But if you go to David Lynch's site, you can purchase David Lynch coffee.
This is amazing to me. I didn't even think he was on the internet. I saw him do an ice bucket challenge, and I thought, well, this is incredible because where's he been?
Yeah, you kind of don't think that David Lynch is going to be on the internet. You just think he like exists on some separate astral plane or something, just coming up with weird shit.
Basically, yeah, that's exactly what I think.
But yeah, if you go on his website, it's not only can you buy coffee, but he does a daily weather report as well.
Oh Lord, you're introducing me to a whole new thing that I did not know existed.
It's like the best waste of time. We're like in the morning when you like got all your Facebook checks and your Twitter checks out of the way, just go on David Lynch, find out what the weather is like over in, I guess, West Hollywood is where he is at the minute. And he does all sorts of interesting things through there, so it's a really good site to check out.
Have you checked the price on the coffee? Is it crazy or is it kind of reasonable?
I can find out for you.
I'll have to look that up because I'll get it and I'll review it on Coffee Break.
I mean, I used to actually import that coffee. When before I was like married and had children and had money to throw away on things like importing coffee.
Damn, I'm really excited now. This is a thing for me.
Yeah, this was also back in the sort of days when they didn't charge you like a fortune to import things as well. Now, at the moment, I can't seem to find it, but what I will do, for anyone who wants to buy David Lynch coffee, I will find the link and I will post it in the section below the podcast so you can all go and get your David Lynch coffee beans. As the tagline goes on it, like him, it's full of beans. But yeah, David Lynch is a man who also likes ties, if I remember right. I think he likes when so much at one point he was wearing like 3 ties at a time. But obviously, you a fellow David Lynch fan, I'm right in assuming?
Yeah, I have a pretty solid love-hate relationship with him.
Okay. Obviously, myself personally, I've just finished revisiting the whole of the Twin Peaks in preparation for 2016 now.
That's too far away. I hate when I hear stuff that's like 2 years out.
I know. I'm like, in one mind, I'm like, it's too far out. Another mind, it's like good, the fact that they're taking time to do it properly.
That's true.
It's going to be 9 episodes and we're going to wrap it all up.
Yeah, that's true. But like as a viewer, I'm like, what do I do with this information for 2 years? Do I think about it? Do I throw it away? I can't deal with it.
I think he's also in the beneficial position. They had an article, I think it was like BuzzFeed or one of those sort of sites, where it showed the Twin Peaks cast then and now, and a lot of them have aged really well. So it's not like they've all had like bad facelifts and stuff where it's going to be like a real horror show over there. But
yeah,
I don't actually know what way they're going or what they're planning to do with it, but I'm excited to say the least.
Yeah, I'm interested to see who they get back together for sure.
Yeah,
it's fun because I just watched Twin Peaks this year, so it's been kind of like a whirlwind that they did the Blu-ray release, and then after that there was news that it was funny because we used to get together every Thursday and watch it, and it was Twin Peaks Thursday, and we'd have coffee and donuts. And ever since then, we've been dying to put like a new show in there just so we could eat donuts every Thursday. But Nick, who's also on the show with me, he had texted me and he said, "Hey, I think Twin Peaks is coming back." And I was like, "You're full of shit. Why do you say that?" And he was like, "'Cause Mark Frost, who's the writer on the show, and David Lynch both tweeted the other day, your favorite gum is coming back in style." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then they announced it the next day, so it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, and whenever they put like those subtle little hints, it just always go over my head. It's sort of like I'm sure there's like Twin Peaks fanboys who just like rolling their eyes in desperation of me making such comments, but whenever they put like some subtle hint, it has to be like a big sort of A4 like signpost like saying, "Yes, it's coming back." I can't be doing with your favorite gum is coming back. Or
I was pretty skeptical. I thought maybe it was like, I don't know, some Blu-ray promotion or something. I didn't think it was new episodes yet.
That's good. But as much as the final episode, it left it kind of open. There are so many wonderful moments in that last episode. I think outside of the whole Benny Hill chase scene, which sort of ends it, when he first goes in the Black Lodge, I think is probably one of the main highlights of that whole series for me.
Yeah, no, it does end on a awesome and frustrating note. So,
well, hopefully hopefully the wait is going to be worthwhile. I'd hate for them to do 9 episodes and it just sucks and it ruins everything.
Yeah, that would be the worst.
We just have those same sort of pyres that we had when episode 1 was released. It was just Star Wars fans just burning merchandise everywhere. Obviously, back to your movie taste. Seeing as we got Halloween about 3 days ago, as of the time of this, 3 days to go, should I say, at the time of this recording, what would you consider to be your scariest movie?
Oh, like you mean scariest movie I've ever seen?
Yeah.
That's tough. I don't get scared very often, but I love horror movies. And I don't know. When I was a kid, when I was young, The Omen was really scary, and as an adult, I just kind of love The Omen. When I was like a teenager, like The Ring was pretty scary.
Yeah,
it was a good theater experience. Recently, I got to give it up to The Conjuring because I thought that shit was on point.
Whenever I see these new horror films, because they're always ghost stories, which is a quicker turn off than like if you see, oh, I got a new vampire movie. It's like great, or a new zombie movie.
It's well done though. I mean, it's well made.
I think my other problem is that every time I've seen it, it's always been at work, so it's been in mute. So
yeah, but yeah, I'm not generally too scared. But I love horror. I just can't. I don't know. I think it runs in my family because everyone in my family is really, especially the women. I don't know why, but my mom like has my Netflix queue. Like I'm like, okay, you can use it, but you're not allowed to put anything on the queue. Just whatever you want to watch. So I'll like get on the next day and there's like 10 awful like slasher movies she went through, and I like to play a game to see like how long she watched them for because she doesn't read the ratings. She's just like, oh, I'm gonna put this on.
Just watches everything blind.
Yeah, I've actually been doing sort of a piss poor job keeping up with horror recently, and it's sort of like the worst part of running like our site is that I don't like focus on older movies as much as I'd like to.
Okay.
I think like 4 years ago I was like, I'm gonna get through a couple of these directors' filmographies, and that's like not happening like at all.
I mean, you've obviously had your director months that have been running since January.
Yeah, and I've been trying to finish up each director's filmography as they come, but I got to Steven Spielberg and I was like, this isn't happening. So that's been on the back burner. But yeah, those are some movies that I think are like actually scary. But I love all sorts of horror. So
that's good. And obviously, what's the film would you say you return to the most?
Out of any genre?
Any genre, just the film you could say that you sort of watch more than pretty much any other film.
Probably a lot. I was a little obsessive in high school. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is one of my all-time favorite movies. I can quote it from front to back. Same thing with Dumb and Dumber. I can quote that. Tommy Boy, Anchorman. A lot of comedies I think are like easy go-tos.
And is there a particular film that you would say, I mean, do you know what the last film you watched that sort of blew your mind completely that you sort of had to rush out and tell someone about?
Well, my favorite film of the year so far is Gone Girl, because I'm an insane David Fincher fan. And he could probably like film somebody taking a shit and it would be amazing. But I did actually just see Birdman yesterday.
Okay.
And that was really, really cool. It was, I don't know, I don't want to say it blew my mind, but it was a very captivating film full of, like, really, really awesome performances. And the way it's filmed is super, super interesting. It's sort of, like, made to look like it's all one take. And I'm like, fascinated by technical filmmaking, so that was pretty cool. But, yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, Birdman's yet to make any sort of presence. It's had some coverage over here in the UK. Michael Keaton's just an actor I constantly struggle to get excited about, though.
Who?
I mean, I've enjoyed films he's been in.
He's very good in this. If that helps.
Okay, that's reassuring.
My recommendation helps.
And obviously, just to wrap up this section, really, what would you say is your ultimate guilty pleasure?
Oh, man. So we've done this list, I think, twice on our podcast. So I have a lot, but it's hard for me because I don't usually feel guilty. Like, even if it's something most people don't like, you know, like, or if it's like Showgirls or something like, I love Showgirls, but I'm not embarrassed of it. The thing I'm sort of embarrassed of are like movies I watch really often that I just like know aren't good, and I don't really understand like why I watch them so often. And the one I sort of come to a lot is Antitrust. Do you remember this movie?
I remember the name. I haven't, as I say, I haven't seen it.
It was like early 2000s, and it had Ryan Phillippe at the height of like Ryan Phillippe-ness, and it had Tim Robbins, and Tim Robbins played this sort of like Bill Gates like esque. He owns like a computer company, but he's kind of like possibly nefarious, and you don't know what's going on.
Right.
Anyway, the movie is not good. It's not like there's nothing notable about it. But it's just like a warm blanket. Like every time it's on, I'm like, oh, yeah, Antitrust. And that's sort of what I feel guilty about, is that like I can't even pinpoint what's enjoyable about the film.
Yeah.
I watch it.
That's
and I'm really into like a lot of like 90s like thrillers like that, like Kiss the Girls and all that shit.
I mean, the 90s in particular were just a fantastic year. The second film choice we've chosen to look at this evening, American Beauty, came from 1999, which for me is probably the ultimate cinematic year. A lot of people say 1984, but personally I feel 1999 was the sort of the great year for cinema.
I am not versed enough to agree with you, but I'll agree with you.
That's fair enough. But the first film we're going to be looking at this evening is the 2006 Rian Johnson film. It's the neo-noir Brick.
Brendan?
Emily?
I really screwed up.
Screwed up how?
The brick.
What?
I didn't know it was bad, but the pin's on it now. You gotta help me.
Slow down now. This isn't good. No. Emily said words I didn't know. Tell me if they catch.
Brick?
No. Tug?
Tug might be a drink, like milk and vodka.
Pin?
You know the kingpin.
Dope runner, right?
Big time. What are you gonna do?
She asked for my help. I just want to know she's okay.
So what's first?
I'm gonna start shaking things up.
So you didn't know this boy?
No, sir. Never seen him.
And he just hit you.
He asked for my lunch money first. Good thing I brown bagged it. You're coming into a certain situation. It's twisted. I'm looking for Emily.
He left her.
Yeah, I did.
You better be sure you want to know what you want to know.
Complicated. Everyone's got their thing.
In the upper crust, the shady D's, they've got symbols so they can tell each other that word getting around.
Coffee and pie.
Coffee and pie? Oh, my.
Keep up with me now.
You got a cigarette?
I don't smoke.
I've seen you smoke.
I don't smoke cigarettes.
I thought we had orange juice. I'm sorry.
Water's fine, ma'am. Thanks.
Oh, wait a minute. We have apple juice. It's country style.
If I get to the bottom, whatever this is,
What do you want?
just to see you sweat. And it gets too hot.
You got a discipline issue with me? Write me up or suspend me.
I see that you're trying to help her. And I don't know anybody who would do that for me.
You are dangerous. I set out to know, put her on the spot. I put her in front of the gun. There's not much chance of coming out clean.
For those of you who've not seen the film, it's about a teenage loner, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who finds himself drawn into the local underworld of the high school crime ring when he's investigating the disappearance of his ex-girlfriend. As I said, it's a neo-noir set in a modern-day high school. Since the film's release, it's sort of dipped under the radar slightly and become something of a cult classic. What did you personally think of this one?
I really like this, actually. This sort of got me into Rian Johnson, who I guess this is his directorial debut, so that's why it got me there. But it was at a cross-section of sort of going through Joseph Gordon-Levitt's filmography, who I've always thought had like a very interesting career. And I remember, I don't know if this like tried to have a full release in the States, but I remember specifically seeing trailers for it in the theater and thinking, this looks really interesting. And I sort of liked the layered like language and how everything sort of meant something else. And it was like a whole made up slang, kind of like Clockwork Orange, where you have to read between the lines and figure out what all the stuff means. And so all of that caught me. And then I never heard about it. And like a year later, I guess I just picked it up on DVD. Because I remembered the cover art. But it's really fun. I really, really like this.
I mean, as you said, this is an early role, sort of Joseph Gordon-Levitt. This was really when he was just breaking out, because he made his break on things like Third Rock from the Sun and 10 Things I Hate About You, and then he kind of disappeared off the scene, and then came back on the independent scene after like a long hiatus. And he did Brick, which is obviously we're talking about now, and the other film he did was Gregor Araki's
Mysterious Skin.
Mysterious Skin, thank you. Which is a completely different movie than this one.
He's very good at that too, though.
He's absolutely fantastic in it. It certainly showed that he has probably the biggest balls in independent filmmaking for making a film like Mysterious Skin.
Yeah.
In which he played a gay rent boy. And including a scene where he's beaten over the head with a shower bottle.
It's a rough scene.
If you haven't seen Mysterious Skin, we are going to cover it on a future edition, but it's probably not, if you're not used to the work of Gregor Araki, I don't think it's the one to start with, as it is pretty rough going in places. But obviously back to Brick, as you said, it's got that iconic sort of poster art. There was two sort of posters that they released. They had the one where all the characters were cut out from the picture, and then you had the one where they were reinserted back in. But even from just on those posters, it sort of stood out as something a bit different. And over here in the UK, it had a cinematic release, but it only really sort of found its audience on DVD. And Rian Johnson, he obviously released this film. He did The Brothers Bloom afterwards, which again didn't really sort of get him much credit. And it was only through his third film, Looper, where he sort of sprung to the forefront. Do you think it's because he was going for like a neo-noir and it's something people weren't used to that it sort of hampered the film sort of getting a bigger audience than it sort of deserved?
Yeah, I think with Brick especially, I feel like it's a movie I can pretty easily recommend to most people I know, and they would be like, oh, this is pretty neat. It might take a minute, but they'd get it and they'd know what was going on. But I guess I can understand, like, from a studio's perspective, them seeing it as like a little bit harder to sell. Even though the trailers did a great job making it look like an interesting kind of different mystery.
Yeah.
But then with Brothers Bloom, I actually have fond memories of that trailer and sort of the whole marketing for that. It came out around a time where it just seemed like there was a lot of quirky ensemble comedy romances, and the whole trailer made it seem like it was just sort of like offbeat for the sake of being offbeat, and I didn't like the trailer at all. And actually, my boyfriend watched it one day and was like, "Oh, I think you'd really like this." And after liking Brick so much, I was like, "Yeah, I should probably visit it." And I love Brothers Bloom. I really, really dig like Rian Johnson's storytelling. I think it's just really fun. I was actually Penelope from the Brothers Bloom for Halloween one year, so
okay,
tying that in. But, yeah, so I think a lot of it had to do with, some of the marketing, and his stuff isn't exactly, super marketable. Even Looper, I feel like if Looper didn't have Bruce Willis and the more of the star power, and, like, if Joseph Gordon-Levitt wasn't on the rise around that time, I think that would have been a lot harder to sell.
Yeah. I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt, as his stars continue to rise, when I look at things like Dark Knight Rises, I feel he's kind of lost his edge, and again with Don Juan, his directorial debut, it doesn't have the same sort of presence that he does have in these sort of early sort of indie sort of films that he was making at the time.
I totally agree.
I mean, with the character of obviously Brendan, he's a character that comes across like so many of the other characters as being older beyond his sort of years. I mean, did you find that was sort of like distracting in a way, or do you?
No.
Were you able to roll with it?
I was able to roll. I think he looks, physically he still sort of looks like he could pass for a high school student in that. And so I just sort of took it as like, he's that kid, he's different. And they sort of, I guess, roll with that concept that, he is classic, like, noir, leading guy, sort of on a mission. And I bought it. I really liked him in this. But I did want to agree with you that, I mean, I don't like the Dark Knight series nearly as much as it seems like everybody else does. And he's not particularly exciting in it. And I also didn't really like Don John as much as everyone else did. And I thought he was fine in it. But I agree that, like, he hasn't really caught that same edge. I love him in Looper, and I like him a lot in this as well. So maybe he'll do... I don't know.
I don't know. With Don John, I liked the first half. And then when it basically just boiled down to, oh, you're all bad for liking pornography, it sort of kind of lost me. And it has a weird sort of ending to it.
I really don't like the end. I feel like that last act is odd, and it didn't fit right with me at all.
But, I mean, it's certainly an interesting group of characters that Rian, is it Rian? Am I right in saying? I
don't know. I always say Ryan, but I constantly mispronounce names, so I'm a really bad person to ask.
I mean, he certainly has an eye for characterization. When you look at the characters that he's created with Brick, a lot of them are the sort of noir sort of stereotypes. You've obviously got the informant, you've got the criminal overlord and the muscle and the femme fatale, all represented within characters in this high school. And obviously we've got Brendan, again, who is our sort of private eye sort of character. There are scenes where I really liked it. I think it's more when he's interacting with other students than when he's like standing up to the vice principal. I think those sort of scenes he kind of lost me slightly. But is there a particular character that sort of stood out to you amongst the sort of in this eccentric sort of casting?
Yeah, I really like the Pin, of course. I like Lucas Haas, and I just, for some reason, the one thing I think that really connects with me with Rian Johnson is he pays attention to story. Obviously, he's trying to like create something that always seems like really literary in all his movies, I feel like, and he pays attention to like just crafting like very interesting characters that make them all memorable, whether or not they're particularly that exciting on the script. So, like, it's, to me, Dode, Tug, like, those names are hard to drop, and I really like Dode, actually, in this movie, but I also like the guy who plays him, Noah something or other. He pops up in films every now and then, and he's actually in Looper, I think, as well. But, yeah, those are sort of, like, my standouts, and I like the femme fatale. She's fine, but she's not stellar, so...
Yeah, she's she wasn't the strongest, but she didn't seem to really do much apart from pout a lot. But
yeah.
My personal favorite would be the Brain.
Yeah, he's very interesting because you're sort of not sure what his whole deal is.
I just like the fact he spends like the whole film pretty much hanging outside the restaurant, yet knows everything that's going on.
Well, there's a lot. I don't know if like you read any of this or not, but I know that a lot of people used to talk about whether or not he's real or if he represents sort of like Brendan's brain.
Okay, so it's sort of like Brendan talking with himself. I never would have thought of that until you just mentioned that then.
Yeah, I didn't see it that way either, but it was sort of like an interesting little thing to like watch on rewatch, and sort of wonder if that's what was happening or not.
I mean, is there a particular favourite scene that you have from in the film? I know for myself it's the scene where he's at the Tug's breakfast table, and in the way the shot's framed, he's just sat there and he's got a muffin beside him.
Yes.
And, the Tug's mum is asking him if he wants to for him for breakfast, and I think it's just such a bizarre scene because in one way you have mindset that these are characters playing out like a noir style thriller, and then you have the mother character comes in. It reminds you that these are still high school kids.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of those little fun little tidbits, I think, throughout the movie where they sort of bring a little reality to like the actual situation, because it seems so much more serious and intense, but yet they are still kids. I mean, there's a lot of like, I don't know, there's a lot of memorable scenes for me. I like everything in the basement with the pin. I just think he's such a fucking weird he's such a weird character to like figure out within this group of people. And he's like just odd enough that there's something sort of not really menacing, but you're gonna pay attention to him. But at the same time, you're like, how is anyone taking this guy seriously?
Yeah.
So I really like all the scenes, sort of in his lair.
Now, the one scene I didn't like in his lair is when is at the end. Warning that we are going to include spoilers throughout this podcast before going any further. And where he's basically being beaten senseless by Tug.
Yeah.
And you don't actually see him. You see like the gun slide off, but his cries for help to Brandon is just so unbelievably creepy, and it really got to me this time. I don't know if it's obviously I'm approaching it as like an older viewer that these sort of things affect me more or what, but it was just an incredibly creepy scene to see again.
Yeah, I'll agree. Also, even though her name's Laura, correct? The femme fatale.
Laura, I believe it's his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah. She, like, the scene where like she approaches him with the piano, like, those are really memorable. I can see what he's like trying to do with that. I never felt like her character added as much intrigue to the story.
Okay.
But yeah, those were like, as far as the way they were shot, they're memorable.
I mean, if you obviously like Brick, I mean, what would you say is the place to go for sort of further viewing? Like another good sort of complimentary film, I would say.
I mean, I think if you like round out his filmography, it's really good. I'm not super well versed in like a lot of older noirs, so I couldn't recommend a really good one. But Brothers Bloom is a lot lighter, but again, it's full of like very interesting characters. It's really literary. And Looper's a little bit closer in tone, maybe. But there's definitely a thread within all his work. I'm actually pretty bummed he's going to do a Star Wars movie, because I wish he would just write his own stuff. But
yeah. And he's doing a lot of TV work as well at the moment. He's currently signed up to do episodes of Preacher for AMC.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, he did some Breaking Bad episodes.
So he's been mainly doing TV work, which again is so frustrating when you have such a unique voice. It's like Richard Kelly. I wish Richard Kelly had come back from wherever he's disappeared to and do like another Donnie Darko or another Southland Tales. But he seems to be still reeling from the sort of double failure of both The Box and Domino.
Oh, I don't even remember Domino. But yeah, he's an interesting one. When you go through, Richard Kelly's like a whole nother subject. But I agree. I feel like, I don't know, especially with people like Johnson who are doing things that most other people aren't doing, and they're doing them pretty well. It's kind of a bummer when they drop off from producing films, but we'll see.
I think I like about Johnson is the fact that he actually produces his own commentaries that you can watch in the cinema with.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he did one for Looper, and I think he did one for Brothers Bloom. And so you could go onto his website and you can download his commentary and then have it on your iPod or whatever you choose to be listening on it. And obviously go to the cinema and watch on the big screen with his commentary.
That sounds awesome.
So he's really interactive with his fans. It's just shame it's a bit more lax when it comes to actually writing stuff for his fans.
He's like really involved on Twitter, and I know he talks to Slash Film and stuff a lot. But yeah. So we'll see what he does next.
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, if you're looking for further viewing, I'm going to have to again recommend something from the Joseph Gordon-Levitt back catalogue, and that's a film called The Lookout. Which, if you're here in the UK, is available to stream via Netflix Instant. I would have to have Lindsay answer if it's available on Netflix US.
I actually don't know. I could look it up, but I do not know off the top of my head.
But again, The Lookout's another film that sort of came out and was quite overlooked again early in his career, much like Hesher, which again is another film worth hunting down. Like a lot of the films in his sort of that early sort of indie career of Joseph Gordon-Levitt before he sort of became a little more mainstream. One of the sort of last thing just to sort of wrap up Brick really, and that's that when he was obviously doing the production for it and going into sort of casting that, he actually banned the cast members from watching like any sort of noir films, and because he didn't want people doing sort of like bad Humphrey Bogart impressions. I mean, do you think it makes a difference, or do you think it's always sort of in the back of the cast's mind that these are the sort of characters they're playing and they try and work it in anyway?
I don't know. It definitely could have been worse. You know, it might have like affected them negatively. I guess we won't really know. But that's interesting that he didn't have them do that. Maybe he wanted it to still have sort of a modern like as modern as he could make it with the dialogue.
Yeah.
So.
It's for me. It works well. That combination of styles. You have in one mind you have like all your noir sort of setting, and then the other you obviously have your more modern day high school setting, and the fact it's students just makes it so original to watch. Yeah, it never feels like a gimmick. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But yeah, if as I said, if you like noir, then Brick would certainly be one to check out. Don't know if you got anything else you want to bring up for this one, Lindsay?
No, that pretty much covers it. I definitely recommend it, especially if you're looking for something a little different.
Okay. Going to take a short break. We'll be back with our second selection of the evening, American Beauty.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk...
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing. Car.
Download the show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
And we're back. The second film this evening, as I mentioned before the break, that we're going to be looking at this evening is the 1999 film American Beauty, arguably one of the strongest films of the era. As 1999 is probably one of the most exceptional years for cinema releases.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
We're having everyone write out a job description. That way management can assess who's valuable
and who's expendable.
My parents are trying to take an active interest in me. Why can't they just have their own lives?
I am so proud of you. You didn't screw up once.
Oh my god, it's a psycho next door. Jane, what if he worships you?
I didn't mean to scare you. I'm not obsessing. I'm just curious.
Why does he dress like a Bible salesman?
Today I quit my job, and then I blackmailed my boss for almost $60,000 past the asparagus.
Your dad's actually kind of cute.
I think he and your mother have not slept together in a long time.
Shut up!
You think you're the only one who's frustrated.
I'm not? Well then, come on, baby, I'm ready.
Welcome to America's weirdest home videos.
This is for your own good, boy.
There are rules in life. Yes, sir. Don't give up on me, Dad.
Smile! You're at Mr. Smiley's.
You are so busted.
I love shooting this gun.
Directorial debut of Sam Mendes, while also being written by Alan Ball. It stars Kevin Spacey as Lester Burnham, an office worker who has the mother of all midlife crisis, while at the same time also following his teenage daughter, played by Thora Birch, led silent astray by her wayward friend Angela, played by Mina Suvari, while at the same time getting involved with the awkward neighbour across the road. 1999 is obviously quite a while ago for this film. Do you think it stood up to sort of the test of time?
I think it does. It's like I said, I don't know if this was a good idea to pick one of my favorite movies of all time, but it is. And I haven't rewatched it in a while, and we were talking beforehand about this, and I just rewatched it front to back again, and I was surprised at like just how much it got me again. I think it's really fantastic. So, and I'm sure I'll dive deeper into that. What do you think?
I think it still holds up. There's nothing in it that's particularly could sort of age at all. I think it's one of those stories that you can tell from any sort of time it could have been made, and it would still hold up perfectly well. I think the key element here is Kevin Spacey. Even though the studio didn't want to cast him originally, they wanted to have a bigger star, but there's something about his performance here which truly embodies the character of Lester, who, as you said, is having the mother of all midlife crisis, as he not only quits his job to go and flip burgers, he starts smoking pot and working out, and even questionably gets involved with his daughter's best friend Angela at one point. Obviously Alan Ball is a sort of writer where he's not renowned for sort of holding back. He obviously went on to do things such as 6 Feet Under and True Blood. How do you find the film? I mean, do you think it sort of intentionally sets out to shock and challenge audiences, or how would you personally view it?
I don't know if shock is necessarily the right word. I think what it sets up is just sort of trying to contrast the typical suburban thing. So they take it in sort of the extremes that would be cinematic, and they revolve it around this somewhat of a mystery, sort of Spacey's death, because we start off knowing that it's going to happen, and we're not really sure how it's going to get there, or what's going to happen, if somebody's going to murder him or what.
It's always something surreal when they when the narrator announces that they're dead already. Yes, and I thought the one thing I actually thought was really weird that I didn't remember was that they kind of start the movie off with a clip from Ricky's camera where he's talking to Thora Birch's character Janie. Sorry, he's talking to Janie about her dad. She's fed up with her dad, and they have sort of a joke between each other about killing him, but obviously it doesn't seem like a joke at the beginning, which I thought was a really interesting clip to show at the beginning of the film. I don't know if it was completely necessary, because I think it could have played out the same way longer on. But yeah, I don't know if it set out to shock, but I think they were sort of taking a lot of inner turmoil that I'm sure tons of people are faced with in their everyday life, because maybe most people are boring, but a lot of people sort of have dramatic things that they're hiding, and they just sort of crammed it all into one movie. It's interesting as well, because it's not just Lester's story that you follow. It switches between his sort of materialistic wife Caroline, who's played by Annette Bening, and then we also switch over to his daughter Jane, who's played by the very underrated Thora Birch, who is, again, I would say this is a performance to rival the one she gave for Ghost World. Yeah, I haven't seen Ghost World, actually. I know that it's a favorite of yours. It is. Ghost World is, if you haven't seen it, you have to go and see it. It's a sort of film that you will, like The Fall, you will wonder why you haven't watched it sooner. It's a very sort of quirky sort of indie comedy, but again, like this film, it questions why Thora Birch isn't obviously doing more, where obviously her co-stars like Scarlett Johansson have obviously gone on to do bigger things like The Avengers, and had sort of more of a career. The most popular theory is the fact it's down to her dad constantly interfering in her career. I didn't know that. He's as Robert said when we were doing the Ghost World podcast, he is a rather creepy dude. Mainly the popular story that tends to float around is the fact that in another film, Thor was actually required to do a sex scene, and despite being a closed set, he insisted on being on set, which is bad enough, but then he gave the thumbs up to the guy doing the scene with his daughter. Ew. That's weird. From there, it's just there's a whole list of incidents where he's got into arguments with directors and fellow cast members. He was also present on the nude scene she does here, because she was, I believe, both her and I can't remember her name now. Mina Savari, thank you. Were both underage at the time for obviously the requirement to be nude as required by the Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah, I thought that was odd. I didn't know that. I read that the other day, and I thought that was really odd. I had no idea that she was only 17. Not that she looks 17, but I didn't pay attention. I always just kind of assume people are 18 when they're doing those sort of scenes.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. But you just kind of like ran down the cast real quick, and I just sort of want to mention how great this cast is. Obviously, Spacey's getting the credit because he's the main show, and he's fantastic in it. I really like Kevin Spacey, and this is like one of his best performances ever. But like you said, Thora Birch is super underrated. I also think Wes Bentley's really good in this, and I feel like his character could have went like a number of different ways. So what he sort of brought to the table was really interesting. Annette Bening, that sort of just like makes sense to me. Like, I get her as this character, and she does really well. But Mina Suvari is actually really, really fucking good in this. I know it's not the most exciting role to play, but she sort of nails exactly what she has to do, like, the whole movie. And, like, on rewatch, I just sort of was really appreciating, like, her performance, and she feels like a real girl, like, that I would have known, like, in high school. Like, I can see this person. Chris Cooper is great, and the other thing I wanted to mention was, like, Allison Janney plays Ricky's mom, who's like a total space cadet, and they don't really go into a lot of detail on like what's really wrong with her, but she's completely checked out. And while it isn't the showiest role by far in the movie, I was really surprised because I didn't remember that was Allison Janney. And it's so polar opposite from everything else she plays.
She's a hard actress to place. Like, if you said, Alison Janney's in something, I wouldn't be able to place her. It's only because, obviously, you mentioned the fact that she plays Ricky's mum, who is completely zoned out. It never explains if she's just, like, medicated up to the eyeballs, or there's been some sort of incident, or if it's to do with her overbearing husband or what. But
I sort of like that they leave it vague, and it makes it a little bit more upsetting, because you're not really sure what the combination is there, and why she's so checked out. But yeah, she's really touching in that, and I guess I'm just used to seeing her as like that sort of like vivacious, like outgoing, like chatty Cathy kind of character.
Okay.
So I thought this was really like, wow, I can't remember. I completely forgot that was her, basically.
Yeah.
Which is sort of good, I guess, for her for her character.
I mean, she's doing well. Yeah. I like it when you can. It's like when you have Meatloaf in Fight Club. The fact that he takes pride in the fact that no one recognizes him as Bob.
Right.
Because it is completely different than everything we've seen Meatloaf play before. He's normally sort of very outgoing and exuberant sort of roles, whereas Bobby's kind of this more sort of sensitive and to an extent more neurotic sort of character.
Yeah.
Even if he is wearing fake boobs.
But no, you're right though. People forget that's who that is, and that's a good thing.
I mean, obviously, just reeling back slightly, you mentioned Wes Bentley. I have so much difficulty taking his character seriously since I saw Not Another Teen Movie. Because it's sort of like he's to describe his character, he's sort of the loner, sort of weird kid who spends all his time sort of filming the beauty in the world around him, which just reminds me of the art students when I went to college, and they used to film and photograph any old rubbish and then make pretentious remarks about it, like making it sound deeper than it was. And there's the memorable video of a plastic bag blowing in the wind, which I believe that Alan Bell put some like deeper Buddhist sort of spin on when he's obviously been asked about it. But now, because of Not Another Teen Movie, it's sort of like, oh look, there's the creepy kid and his bag.
Yeah, I like totally get the criticism of that. It is sort of hard to take serious, and I think it's like right on that borderline of like just complete like silliness almost. But what I really like about it, and like what I'll defend like to my dying day about it, is I probably wouldn't be the person to film the bag and talk about how beautiful it is, but I really like the thing about Ricky is I like genuinely understand him, I guess, on rewatch. Like, I understand who this guy is and why he's feeling this way. And while I think it's a little bit over the top, and in real life I'd probably make fun of this person. Sorry. Especially when he's explaining it to Jane and showing her, like, why it's beautiful. I think, like, I totally understand him and feel him in that moment. And I get that, like, this high school kid who's dealt with more shit than he's probably had to deal with, like, is feeling this right now. So it doesn't come across too silly to me. I like where it sits in the movie, but I can see why, like, people could, like, pick that apart and not enjoy it.
Yeah. I'd certainly enjoyed his character more when he's, like, interacting with Lester than I did when he's interacting with Jane.
Yeah.
The kind of day and night, these characters, obviously when he's with Lester, he's stealing pot. He's got his mini fridge full of clean pee because his father's constantly drug testing him, despite the fact he's smoking all this altered pot that he's running as one of his many sidelines.
I think that's what I like about his character, though. I like that he's sort of different around, like, whoever he's around, basically. And I'm sure part of that is, like, a defense mechanism that he's, like, built up in his family unit. But also I just think that, like, plays to the bigger part of the fact that Ricky's got a little more figured out than most people do at that age. And I think he understands that everyone is different. He's trying to, like, see something in everyone, which is not something that most of us do. I think, you know, most people kind of, like, stick to their own and seek out similar-minded people or, like, similar people. And I think there is something, like, for lack of a better term, kind of beautiful that, like, he wants to connect with people that aren't similar. You know, Jane and her dad aren't alike, so their interactions aren't really alike. But I don't know. On rewatch, I enjoyed his character a little more than I remembered enjoying it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Jane falls between those two groups. You've obviously got Angela, who's sort of your more typical high school sort of girl. She's, like, head of the cheer squad, and the Lester's masturbation fantasy, as we have for that now iconic scene with the rose petals covering her as they lies in bed and they're sort of falling on his face. Obviously, the thing I wanted to question really, the relationship between Jane and Ricky, would you say it's sort of a believable one, or do you think it's sort of overplayed? Because we have a lot of those sort of more artsy sort of moments, like when she takes her bra off and you see him filming her across the street, which surprisingly doesn't come off as creepy as it sounds.
Yeah.
And obviously you see on the TV screen that he's not looking at the fact she's topless, but looking at her face and that. I mean, was it a sort of believable relationship, or do you think it's just sort of these two sort of outsiders that have sort of been thrown together out of circumstance?
I think it's a little of both. I think it is kind of believable. I mean, I didn't know anybody particularly like this, but especially at that age, and I think, like, maybe your first love, you know, there's a lot that goes into that, and especially, like, your mental state. And if this is someone who's obviously noticing her for the first time, she feels like, and she's feeling comfortable in her own skin around him. And I think that's why, like, because of their age and sort of what's going on with them, it makes the moments that could seem a little off, like when he says, "Will you run away with me tonight, like, and go to New York?" Which sounds really cheesy, but, like, you know she would say yes. Like, I feel if these people were real and you knew them and this was happening, I believe it, basically. Yeah. So, like, again, like, when she's sort of that scene where she's sort of undressing, I think out of context, somebody might say, like, oh, no one would ever do this. But within the context, I guess, of, like, who they are and, like, where they've been, it feels very believable to me. Also, the scene that scene really bothers me because she, like, wants to get a boob job. And I'm like, what are you talking about, lady?
That was the next point I was going to make. It's sort of, obviously, at the start of the film, she's there on the computer. She's obviously looking at getting her boobs done. And obviously, you have this scene where she's obviously topless in front of Ricky. And in a way, it feels like he's sort of helping her, like, realize that she's not this sort of freak, that she is perfect how she is.
Yeah,
it's a way that he's sort of this healthy influence on her, rather than her so-called best friend Angela, who's, like, encouraging her to sort of, like, follow the sort of crowd, and who makes all this big talk about obviously sleeping with photographers and going on modeling shoots and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Ricky sees her and understands. And that's, like, I think rare in general, especially at that age, for anyone to really, like, sort of take an active interest in you for something more than maybe like superficial reasons, just because that's the nature, I think, of that like age and what's happening in your life at that point. But he's a little different, and like we've already sort of like ran that he finds something in other things in life that most people don't look at, and I think that really translates to what he sees in her. And I don't know, that I just think that's a really nice scene, and not just that scene, but like their relationship in general, the fact that he helps her sort of with all these issues that she's going through.
Just obviously going back to Kevin Spacey, he's certainly an unusual actor. He's not sort of falls into that sort of character actor category, yet he's not the sort of typical leading man, which obviously explains why the studios were reluctant to cast him, despite the fact his sort of lack of sort of leading films at the time of this point of his career. I think he had only really done 7 as John Doe, and he hadn't really sort of done that. But throughout his career, he's constantly sort of played these interesting sort of characters. Even though to obviously look at him, he's not your sort of typical leading man, would you say?
I agree. Yeah, I think his career has been really interesting, and I think you sort of said it the best with how he's not really a character actor, but also not really your typical leading man. And I think that helps a lot here. I think that it gives him enough sort of like gravitas so that you understand like reformed Lester, and he feels like authentic, and you kind of like want to root for him from the get-go. But once he makes his sort of like life changes, he's ordinary enough that you can sort of see yourself in him, but also he's got enough charisma that you buy it, like that it makes sense that this is his transformation. He's towing the line.
Yeah, obviously before we were recording, I was trying to think of another actor that would group with Kevin Spacey. Obviously, Steve Buscemi was the first one that came to mind, but he's more sort of the oddball sort of character. Closest I could think of would be Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah, I don't think he's had quite as exciting of a career, but I get what you're saying.
But obviously the character of Lester is extreme, to say the least. Obviously he's stuck in his sort of dead-end job. When the film first opens up, he's like having to deal with the fact that a prostitute has stolen one of the company credit cards and basically charged bankrupt to the companies that are having to fire people. And then he has that great line where, "Oh, why should we all be punished? Because Brad has to pay people to fuck him."
Yeah. Yeah. No.
And then he sort of suddenly snaps and goes off on this completely new path where he quits his job, basically outlining. And there's so many times where I've felt like pulling a Lester, and just where he feels like the 4 minutes sort of like, "Oh, I spend my day covering for other people's shit," and obviously he goes to
jerking off, so I don't have to think about what closely resembles hell or something.
Well, this is the thing. Is like one of the first interactions we have with this character is watching him jerk off in the shower, which he highlights as being the high point of his day.
I love that line. Yeah, I actually like wrote a list once about like movie wish fulfillment moments, like things you wish you could like pull off in real life, and his like quitting scene like made the list. It's just, I think, some sweet justice for him, but also like vicariously, I'm sure a lot of people would love to tell like their corporate bosses to go fuck it.
Yes, I think it's up there with the quitting scene in Fight Club, if perhaps not as extreme.
Yes, which is also a really fucking good scene. But yeah, those moments are really fun. Obviously, the movie's actually very funny for it being like a very heavy drama. Has a lot of like really good humor in it, and most of it I think comes from Lester's little transformation of letting go. I think what really works about the movie, besides following Lester, I'm glad we sort of follow the other characters as closely as we do, even though it's really Lester's movie. No matter what like you're doing in life, unless you're living your like ultimate dream with, I don't know, you own an island. I don't know what that would be, but most people have something in their life that they'd love to be able to kind of like get rid of that stress or whatever it is. So it's easy to like relate to, I think, right now, even though I'm not nearly in the situation that Lester finds himself in the beginning of the movie. It's relatable to think, you know, what are we doing to like make ourselves happy? Like at the end of the day. And he is able to kind of come to a conclusion about what is making him happy. Why has he gotten so far away from, you know, the person he once enjoyed? And it's kind of cool to like follow that character.
Yeah. I think with obviously his moment of happiness would you say it's sort of like his early adult years, would you say?
Yeah, another one of my like favorite parts is that they don't really mention what he's trying to chase, because he mentions like, oh, it didn't used to be like this, and there's like a few little references to sort of like happier times, and they seem to be like maybe college, maybe something else, but I think when the fact that they leave it open is kind of nice, because you're not really sure like what exactly he's going for, other than the fact that what's happening now isn't working. So he's like trying to strip that down, I guess. I
did actually wonder if he has an end game.
Right.
To this, I mean, is there some sort of bigger sort of breakdown he was set for? But obviously we don't see that play out because obviously his sudden demise at the end of the film.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's sort of upsetting, you know, even though we know it's coming, it's really upsetting when he's killed, but it's also kind of beautiful because, like, he's finally happy. Yeah. And he's even, like... Can we talk about the ending? Is that cool?
Yeah, you can feel free. We already warned about spoilers earlier in this podcast, so feel free.
Okay, cool, because this is probably one of my favorite film endings of all time. One, it's sort of a wrap-up of a mystery, which is interesting, and the threads are all tying together at the end. But what I especially like, as far as Lester's end, I think there's a moment where you're never, like, super creeped out by his fascination with Mina Servari's character. Like, it's one of those things where you're like, this is not right. But you sort of see it as, like, semi-harmless at first, because nothing's really happening. And then, of course, when they're face-to-face and it's, like, the moment, I think it, like, immediately sets in as to, oh, God, please don't let him go through with this. Like, I don't know if I can actually look at the character the same way. So I think that, like, ending of her character, which once she kind of admits that she's actually a virgin and she's not this person she claims to be, her character makes 300 times more sense than it did the whole movie, and you sort of understand her, and he has that realization of, like, his expectations of her. And I really love that scene, and how he, like, immediately sees her, like, for the child she is, and how she's not just this, like, image he's been projecting. And that is sort of his, like, last full circle, like, his last thread, because that's been a lot of his driving force. You know, it set off these things into motion, but then it also, like, helps him come full circle with his, like, daughter and what she's been going through. So I really like that, and I think he finally, like, is, you know, maybe a little bit, like, he's looking at the photo of his family, so he's a little nostalgic, but also he's actually, like, really happy for the first time.
I mean, it's that scene there where he's obviously smiling at the photo before he gets shot in the head. I didn't... kind of, obviously, as we're discussing it now, I can't help but feel, would that be like the end of this midlife crisis? He would go back into the sort of corporate world, he'd quit his burger flipping job and stop maybe smoking as much pot?
Well, I think it was definitely, like, you're right, like, that wake-up call to, like, well, obviously I can't do this forever. And it was a little bit more of, like, things were now actually in perspective. Like, he was on this path to, like, get his life back, and now he's like, oh, well, this is my life. But it was also pretty damaged at that point, so there would have had to been a lot of, he leaves everyone else around him pretty fucked up, basically, at the end of it. Not by any fault of his own, obviously. But
yeah, it's kind of a real car wreck that by the end. But there is that great, obviously, the great scene where he quits his job by blackmailing his boss. And then he goes to the fast food restaurant which obviously we've earlier alluded to the fact that his happiest time was when he was like flipping burgers and smoking pot and just having money to buy records. And when he goes to the application, she's like, "Oh, we don't have any managerial positions." He's like, "I just want the most demeaning job you have available."
Yeah. He's like, "I want the least amount of responsibility."
And obviously he buys the typical midlife crisis car, which in this case is the Pontiac Firebird. And he just obviously starts smoking pot and working out and that. But with that actual death scene, I don't know what it was. The first time I saw it, I actually thought his wife had shot him.
Well, they do play that aspect up a lot. It also
because you obviously see her in the car and that.
Yeah, it looks a lot like her gun.
And for some reason, I don't know, mentally edited out the scene where Chris Cooper comes into his house. He's like covered head to toe in blood. I don't know how I'd missed that on the first walkthrough. So like the second time I watched it, and obviously noticed that scene, it was like, oh, obviously the Colonel shot him.
It's a really good reveal, actually. I really like the way they piece together the ending. And you mentioned his wife, and this is actually sort of her most interesting at the end, because she's pretty easy to label like a bitch in this movie. She cheats on Lester. She's not accepting, like, she's not even trying to really work on the marriage, it seems like. But it's clear throughout the film that she's got her whole set of issues, and she's dealing with them in really unhealthy ways. But I just have to give like kind of a shout out, because I know I've said a lot already about how this is my favorite movie. This is also a movie that always makes me cry. Maybe that makes me sound like a little bit of a baby, but that's okay. But the ending in particular is really beautiful when he talks about what he sees before he dies. And I think at this point it's sort of like just Pavlov's dog. Like, he starts talking and I'm like, oh, and I start crying. But the scene that always gets me is we see Carolyn outside with the gun and we hear the shot, so we know that she didn't do it, right? And I think all along it makes sense. Like, she could have never done it. I think that she wanted to try to project that image and say like, oh, I'm gonna do this, but in her heart of hearts, she could have never done it. She's weaker than she likes to let on. And when she comes home to discover him, which we don't see him, but we see her go up to her room and throw the gun in like the hamper. And there's a scene where she just like collectively clasps all of his clothes. Ugh, that ruins me. I don't know what it is, but I think that there's like a very oddly human moment that you wouldn't think about. It's also a scene that's in another movie that I don't want to say because it would probably ruin that movie. But it reminds me sort of like a similar sort of like that's your last tie to him. But kills me. I'm getting choked up just now thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it's because of obviously the character Lester is so extreme. We obviously kind of to an extent forget about Annette Bening's sort of performance here. There's so many sort of great moments. The fact that she coordinates her outfit and is sort of like, oh, you see those gloves and that's not a mistake, that's intentional. And then she cares about this sort of like creating this sort of perfect suburban life for herself. Yet at the same time, she is fiercely independent in having her own career because she's the real estate agent. And we obviously see her as she's trying to sell the house, and she gets involved with the rival realtor Buddy Kane, who's probably one of the most greasiest characters.
I know, he's bad.
So it is a bit nauseating, their sex scene there, but he's I don't know, there's something about that. He's just like, I'm trying to think of the word now, but he's just so unbelievably greasy. It just makes me cringe every time I see him on the screen. He's played by Peter Gallagher, who seems to like do well either doing like random musical appearances or playing these sorts of characters. Yeah. So for him, it's not too much of a stretch. But I mean, do you feel that obviously the character Caroline was underused, or do you think we sort of see enough to obviously sort of understand her character?
I mean, I think that I could have dealt with actually a little bit more of her characterization, because I do think that she gets sort of relegated to being like just the bad, like I feel like people don't look at her as human as maybe she deserves. But if you like read between the lines enough, I think it's pretty obvious to see that, like I was saying earlier, she has her own demons that she doesn't deal with and doesn't know how to deal with. And I think it's easy to see how someone could get wrapped up in that. Like if you are chasing a goal that you think is sort of that goal is going to make you happy, and along the way she doesn't have anyone there to sort of help her like actually be a human being, which is very apparent that she struggles with that constantly, keeping her emotions in check. And it's really disturbing that she doesn't have the fortitude to like talk to Lester or anyone in her life. So it's like extra, like you were saying, greasy when Buddy comes along, because I think the problem with him is like it's so painfully obvious that one, he doesn't actually like really care about her at all, and two, he just seems like whatever he's doing to like sell you insurance. I know he's a real estate guy, but you know what I mean? Like it's painfully obvious to the outside that what she's getting from him is not what she needs. So I think after her like final break, when like Lester sees them, and for all intents and purposes is quite polite, considering the circumstances, could have been a lot worse. And it's like that really awful moment to me when she says to him, like he's in the car with her, and he's like, "Oh, well, I guess we have to cool it because like he doesn't want this drama," and she's obviously about like near tears, ready to cry, saying like, "Oh, you're right, we have to like put on a front." But you can tell in her performance that she wants him to say, you know, like, "Oh no, it's gonna be okay, like I'll be here for you," and it's so bad. He just doesn't. He says yep, or I don't even know if he says anything, and just like slinks out of the car, and it's kind of the worst. And
you can tell he just wants to get out there as quick as possible. But I mean,
oh, absolutely.
Buddy Kane's like having his own midlife crisis, it seems. Yeah. Whereas he's sort of like projecting this sort of. It's like when you watch The Apprentice, and you see like the male contestants, and they're like trying to do that whole Wolf of Wall Street sort of bullshit.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Annette Bening's character Caroline is sort of like his sport lay. That you know that if she wasn't around, he'd probably be like trying to pick up like 22-year-olds in some bar or something.
Yeah. Yeah. She means not really anything. I mean, even like there's scenes with their like bedroom talk where, which like you were saying, the sex scene's like really gross. And she's like, I mean, she's saying like, she's mentioning that he's like the king of real estate, which is so fucking nauseating. But afterwards, they're sort of like, you know, like bedroom talk. She's saying, she's like references his like his majesty and like things like that, that like he's not even remotely into. Like his performance is like so far like, yeah. Like I'm used to like whatever, like, and she just could not be more into what's happening because it's like letting this release for her. That, and I think she also thinks partially that like because he's interested in her sexually that she's successful in a weird way. You know, she's been chasing what he has, so she's like elated that he's even giving her the time of day. Yeah. But it's like really painful to see their interactions, I think. And because I think it is making her happy, but in the wrong way. Like, it's not what she needs, basically.
The trouble is, every time I saw his character, I just imagined him to be, like, wearing this, like, Jerry Lawler-style crown.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's the king of real estate, so I just imagine him constantly, like, wearing this prop. And, like, that scene where they're in bed, that he'd be, like, wearing some sort of crown or something, so...
Yeah, and they, like, plaster his face on a park bench or something.
But, I think the best, I think one of my favorite scenes of Caroline is when she's trying to sell the condo, and you see her and she's doing all this prep work, and you have these people who have no interest who just, I don't know, come along to like score free food or whatever they've turned up at this house opening for, and they're like making these benign criticisms. It's sort of like, oh, I thought this pool was supposed to be lagoon-like, and she's so desperate to say, it's like, oh, I can wheel out some tiki torches and stuff. Yeah. And you just feels so bad for her that she like desperately is putting all this work in, and like, you know, it's going to just absolutely pay out for Zip, which is probably why she's, I don't want to say that she's such a bitch, but she really is. At her home, she like forces everyone to listen to her awful old-timey records around dinner table, and I think just like in perfect silence all the time.
It's such a front for her. Like, that's not really who she is, and I think like that scene with the house is like really representative of that, because she's certainly like, you know, like an A-type when she's there and she's being a little bit nutty, saying like, I will sell this house today, and you know, kind of game show hosting it. But what's great is that you see, like, she actually did put a lot of work into it, and she's trying her best to, like, describe it to these people who are being sort of, like, unnecessarily rude. And even the families before that are just, like, completely turned off to, like, whatever she's selling. But it's, like, almost admirable that she's just trying to, like, do the best job she can do with, you know, not exactly the best house to sell in the world. But it's sort of admirable because she is trying really hard to, like, do well at her career and something that she thinks is important. So it's, I think, really upsetting when she, like, has her little mental breakdown, but then is so pent up and focused on what she needs to convey to people that she literally, like, hits herself. That it's tough when you see her, like, at home and she's so turned off. And especially, I think the hardest scene is, like, when she gets upset that the beer might spill on the couch. That's really rough because, like, you think maybe she's, like, going to have a nice moment and then she can't even, like, let herself have it.
Yeah.
Ugh. I'm glad we talked about Carol so much. I feel like she doesn't get talked about in this movie a lot.
She doesn't. It's, again, it's such a powerhouse performance by Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
That it does kind of dominate everything else in the film. And then you've obviously got the fascinating sort of interaction between Forbeck and Wes Bentley, which again kind of overshadows it. And I don't know if it's because of those creepy sex scenes that we kind of forget about, kind of force it out of our mind. But the other character that's always never seems to get mentioned is Scott Bakula as the gay neighbor.
Yeah.
And
Gary's,
I really love
right?
this. I mean, it's really sort of key, the fact that when this was released in 1999, certainly here in the UK, the sort of people being openly homosexual and being out and proud wasn't such a common thing. And I love the fact that Alan Ball sort of predicted that a lot of gay couples would become these sort of like these sort of oldie, sort of suburban sort of couples like we see with Scott Bakula's character. And it's not a huge role, and it's really only there to sort of highlight the fact that the Colonel's not only a homophobe but a Nazi as well.
Right. Yeah.
Because he's obviously got his Nazi China that he hides with the rest of the China wear, which is really bizarre.
Yes. They are interesting.
Yeah.
The scene where they come to his door and try to explain to him what's happening is kind of a fun scene. And sort of, again, if anyone, they're not trying to put on any front, even though they're surrounded by everyone else is, basically. Everyone else is trying to be someone they're not really. And they seem to just be, like, very sort of honest and oddly enough, not in your face at all. Even though Chris Cooper seems to think, like, oh, that's the worst thing about it. They try to rub your face in it. You know, like, he has that line in the car. But they're just, you know, they're just being who they are and doing it better than seemingly everyone else around them.
They're probably the most normal characters in this whole film.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you have got this, you've got a gay couple living in London suburbia.
Yeah.
And I think it was very forward thinking of Ball has obviously been very outspoken on gay and lesbian rights. Obviously being a gay man himself, he's very proud of his sexuality and feels he has no way to sort of hide it at all. And it was obviously nice the fact that he found a way to work it in that was sort of, I don't want to say under the radar, but it was sort of there. And I think a lot of people sort of missed sort of how sort of prominent that would obviously become in the years that have obviously passed since the film's release.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Obviously, we've talked a lot about the characters. Sam Mendes, it was his first directorial debut. Up until this point, he'd been mainly directing theatre. Do you feel that he's been able to make the transition from stage to film?
I mean, I think he's there. I don't know if he's necessarily, like, made a huge name for himself as far as being a visually notable director. I happen to really like the direction here. I like sort of the way the more fantasy elements are kind of added in, and I like the way he does his sort of like triple takes. Like he has a lot of like repeated motions, which I think is interesting. But I'm not really familiar with a lot of his other stuff. As far as it standing out to be like, oh, you know, this is Sam Mendes. I know all of his movies, but besides something like Skyfall, which I think is probably more Roger Deakins movie than his movie, he doesn't have like that sort of auteur, like, if it's a Sam Mendes movie, I'm not, exactly running out of the house to see it, even though I love American Beauty.
It is a weird sort of film. It sort of stands out when you obviously look at the films which followed. Because I was hoping so much that he would do enough for American Beauty. I think the closest we got was Away We Go, which ended up being sort of more of a indie comedy than anything close to sort of American Beauty's social satire.
Yeah.
Certainly everything that sort of followed, things like Road to Perdition, Jarhead, and Revolutionary Road were sort of more straightforward, and obviously he did Skyfall, which I think was more hampered by the fact MGM had gone bankrupt at that point. So it'd be interesting to see what he does with Bond 24.
Yeah, I think with American Beauty, it's one of those movies that everything is just coming together, and it's not so much like everything's his vision. Like, you have a great script, and then the music is amazing, and it doesn't exactly feel like it's all Sam Mendes' baby. It just feels like it's a combination of everything.
I would say it's more Alan Ball's film than Sam Mendes.
I would agree.
There's certainly more sort of reliance on his art director and his cinematographer than he sort of seems to be putting into it. Sort of obviously from a sort of directorial sort of standpoint, it seems a lot. Certainly looking at a lot of the shots, they're sort of very straight on. He's sort of directing it really as he would for stage.
Yeah, I could see that.
He is a director that I would say the same about Danny Boyle. I don't get overexcited about a new Danny Boyle film that I would like, say, a new Wes Anderson or a Tarantino sort of film.
All right, well, we're gonna have to agree to disagree on Boyle, but.
Oh, really? You're a Boyle fan?
A huge fan. I think he's really. I think what I like about Boyle so much is I always feel like whatever project he worked on, he was like insanely passionate about.
I think it's off that way, certainly.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day.
I think we will have to we'll get some Boyle films out and we'll argue out the pros and cons of his career, certainly on another podcast. But
I would totally do that.
Yeah. Final thoughts on American Beauty. Do you think there's anything we haven't sort of covered on this one?
I mean, I feel like we could go on for a while if we wanted to really discuss like themes and characters, but it stays at the top of my favorite films list, and I think it's I wouldn't tell everyone to go watch it as it's going to be the greatest thing you've ever seen, but it's certainly a really solid drama, comedy drama, I guess, and I think it's a must see.
Further viewing, if you like American Beauty, what would you recommend watching next?
Oh, I should
have... think of anything, really, because it's sort of unique in the fact it sort of stands alone, really.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something that melds everything together so nicely. I don't know. Come back.
For myself, if you're obviously looking for sort of more social sort of satire, again, the outstanding Forbatch in Ghost World would be my next recommendation. I would also, to an extent, recommend American Splendor. It's another look at American life through a character who sort of has a very sort of unique vision of how life should be lived. But as I said, it is a unique film that sort of marches to its own drum. And again, the 1999 was filled with so many films like this. When you look at films like Being John Malkovich and Go, which were also released in '99. If you thought of anything, are you still struggling to sort of?
I'm still struggling, but yeah, I haven't seen American Splendor. It's on my to watch list.
Yeah, so. It's Paul Giamatti again doing a surprisingly good role as a rare leading man.
Yeah, it's like the cartoonist, right?
That's right. It was based on the cartoon strip of the same name. It also features the guy who wrote the original comic strip, who I believe was unfortunately passed away.
Oh, okay.
But if you haven't seen American Splendor, I would certainly recommend it. The other film which has only just now come to mind would be the French black comedy sitcom, in which a sort of middle-class worker. He brings home a mouse which seems to have a strange effect on his family who surrounds him. Kind of similar to the Lester's sort of midlife crisis, but has, I would say, it takes it to slightly more extreme ways, but makes for a fun double viewing with American Beauty, to say the least.
Okay, cool. Well, then you had 2 good recommendations, so I don't need one.
So we're covering each other tonight. So this brings us to the end of another edition of the Mad, Bad and Downright Strange Showcase. I'd like to thank my guest this time, Lindsay, for coming on and talking about both Brick and American Beauty with us this evening. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Is there anything you want to obviously plug before you go, or tell us where they can find more if they want to obviously see more of your work?
Sure. If you want to read what I write, or if you want to check out the podcast, you can just go to FrenchToastSunday.com. It's pretty easy to navigate. And as far as plugs go, nothing too exciting. We do, you mentioned earlier, we try to do like a Director of the Month spotlight where we sort of feature some specific stuff. It is about to be the end of October, which was Hitchcocktober. And we're moving into November, which is going to be focused on Stanley Kubrick. So that should be exciting.
Cool. Right. Well, again, thank you for coming on, and hopefully we'll get you back on for a future edition.
Yeah, I'd love to be on.
Yeah. Until next time, this is Elwood Jones signing off and inviting you all to keep it strange.